Hey everybody, welcome to a little stop by Spring Realms inside of the Bedrock box. Because I noticed that a few people were wondering kind of how this whole spell system behind me operates. And it's a little bit complicated, but the actual machinery of how it functions is really versatile and really helpful to know. So, with that in mind, today I'm going to be showing you exactly how the tag system works for creating really cool custom command effects. So with that, let's hop into a test world. Okay, that didn't take very long. Right, so here we are, a nice little plain and simple sort of command world. This command that's just down here is giving away the slams. Okay, so the basis of the spell system is you open a book, you push a button, and it does a thing, provided that you actually have like the capacities to do so, otherwise it has this nice little cooldown function. How do I do that? Well, these two blocks are a little bit important, so this one is just constantly trying to degrade my cooldown. This one is just showing off the cooldown effect. That just handles the cooldown. Very simple, just straight little thing to get out of the way there. These are the important parts, especially this part, because this ensures that people can actually use that. The cast spell objective that we see here is of type trigger, so if you have a dummy or if you have a health type objective, this one is just a trigger. And a trigger variable is very handy because it means that a player can activate it without necessarily having access to all of the commands. So for example, on Spring Realms, no one has access to /time, no one has access to /TP, none of that unless they're an admin. But because this is running, they all have access to castSpell. So /trigger castSpell set 1 is the standard for using any of these spells. But you do have to keep this running because they get access to it, and then as soon as they've used it once, they no longer have access to it. So it's important to keep that running for things like this. But before we actually get to tags, let's talk about what you do if you don't have the tags. Because tags are useful, but they're not the end-all be-all that you should be worried about. So to perform that little magic trick of saying cast spell change for set 1, I'm going to cast a spell. Here we are doing a little tell roar that just gives that message out in the corner, and it's targeting anybody who has a cast spell score of at least 1 and a cast spell cooldown of 0. So here I've got two different variables. So there's the triggered spell that I've got, and here's the cooldown that I've got timing down. And if both of those are met, then we immediately do that. Now that's just tell roaring at me. What I would probably do more accurately is to have an execute and have it just tell everybody within about 30 blocks of me. So with that in mind, we'll just rewrite that a little bit. There. So now that's going to tell everybody within 30 blocks that I am casting a spell, specifically me. Or we would hope specifically me, because this should only target me when it's choosing whose name to put into the title there. Then we set the cooldown. Here we are using the exact same selectors. So once again, cast spell and cast spell cool, same values to set my cooldown. And here we're just finally setting my cast spell to 0. Very straightforward. If that's all that you want to do, this is completely easy. That just means that I push the button and I say I'm going to cast a spell and I get a cooldown. Nothing else happens. So the function of this spell currently is that it says I'm going to cast a spell. Not very complicated, but it can get very complicated. So here, of course, we have a book that says Fallen Down. Call down a vicious plume of lightning, destroying friend and foe alike within 16 blocks around the caster. That is significantly more complicated. So what this has to do is first figure out who's casting it. So just like that block over here does to determine that I'm going to say I'm going to cast a spell. Then it needs to select everybody within 16 blocks around me who is not me, and then do about 3 plumes of lightning and a bit of wither effect just to make sure they actually fall over. So that's significantly more complicated. Now this is where tags come in handy. So say for example we use a tag to identify what spell I'm going, because this is just one spell. If I used a different value for every single spell in castSpell, then we have a big issue because it means that every single spell can potentially be set off autonomically by the player. It's much easier for the blocks to actually identify which spell is being cast. So for example, call down an all-destroying plume of lightning, I can reference that inside of data tags where I'm using a test for and other things to determine what spell book the player is holding. But that then means that I can't do that inside of anything else because that's then defining data. So for that, we would add a tag. And in that case, let's get a bit more complicated. So back in a quick moment when I've made this significantly more complicated. Okay then, so we can see that this secondary line is now a significant bit longer, but I'll explain exactly why. So, once again, I push the button, and it just says I'm going to cast a spell, and I get the still particle at the bottom as well. Now, how have I changed this? How have I made this very simple thing quite complicated? Now, if we look over here, scoreboard players tag, so we've got the same variables here, the same selectors, and that just adds the castSpell tag to anyone who should be casting a spell. I can then use that tag to specify exactly who I mean. So if I am looking for somebody who has a specific item, then I can use their item tag here. So we want ID Minecraft written book. So if I'm holding a written book, and I happen to have these values, then from that we can actually determine which spellbook I'm holding, and it then works just perfectly. That also means that they can only cast spells if the player is holding a specific item. It doesn't mean, therefore, that they could use slash trigger normally, which they totally could. So, for example, cast spell set 1. Nothing happens because I'm not holding the right book. Now there is technically a slight way of them getting around this. They can just use the slash trigger command whilst they're holding the book, but it doesn't actually achieve anything special. And in some cases, if they put in the wrong value, they can really mess themselves up. But that's the first part. So that gives us a nice little level of security and allows us to have a whole range of spells. So for example, the Spring Roll spellbook has 30 different spells currently, and I'm planning on adding a lot more. So from there, we then execute from anybody that has the tag of cast spell. We no longer need those specific selectors because we already know that anybody who has this tag has them already. And they tell everybody within 30 blocks using the selector of the closest person with that tag. So that then removes any degree of uncertainty as to who it will tell is casting the spell. And then we set those people to have a spell cooldown. And then we do a little bit of cleanup. We remove that tag because we're done. If we leave that in, it will just continually go through there and it'll be a complete mess inside of your chat box. And then we set that back to 0. What you can do is separate that entirely. So you have this piece here that tells everybody, okay, who should be casting a spell, and have this right after once you've done it for every different spell. And that then allows these circuits to be completely separate. Lovely. But let's do this a little bit more fun. So let's grab these, just put them to the side for the moment. Those are our ender kind of variables. So here we have casting the cooldown. We can shove that over to the side for the moment at least. Okay. Now, from everybody who has the tag of cast spell, so everyone who's casting this particular spell, we want to target everybody within, say, 30 blocks. So R equals 30. Let's say we only want to target 3 targets in total. And let's specifically aim for pigs, because we can see that we've just got a few off in the distance there, so this will be fun. And we're going to have them summon a lightning bolt at their coordinates. Very simple indeed. So, once again, we'll just grab these, shove them back over here, and now we give our spell an actual effect. So, we have one pig over here, and now he's a zombie pig man. So I've got my cooldown, and we had a lovely effect. Very simple, but what if we want to make it a little bit more complicated? What if we want to make sure that, like Fallen Down, we can do a bunch of things to those targets without selecting the caster as well? So this is okay because we're only currently targeting pigs, so that part is easy. So, doop. So there's our summon lightning bolts. Let's have, say, let's have a particle effect on those as well. So now we're getting to the point where we really want to start distinguishing our targets even further by giving them tags as well. So in this case, we want to be using from our caster scoreboard players tag all of those valid targets at spell target, just a random name that we can give it. And we also want to say tag equals not cast spell. So that's targeting all entities, or at least 3 entities of those within 30 blocks of somebody who's casting the spell who isn't one of the people casting the spell. Now you can, if you're using simple selectors which aren't using tags, just have RM equals 1, which means that you're targeting people who are at least a block away from the caster, but that then also means that anyone that shares space with those casters, because you can't put in like decimals and such, are also similarly protected, which can be a bit of a bother. So, now we have target, spell, target. So from there, we execute at E tag equals spell target, our summon lightning bolts. Very straightforward. We can also add a particle effect to them as well. So tag equals spell target. Particle, let's go with large explode, because why not? And just dump in some values here. There. So now, we've got those potentially pigmen, burbly pigs, getting struck by lightning and also giving off a particle effect, and we're not having to do the same big bulk of selectors every single time. Now, of course, we do need to do a little bit of cleanup once again. So scoreboard players at E tag equals spell target remove spell target. That's less of a concern if you actually want them to die, but, you know, helps to be clean and tidy. And we just put in our enders again. It's important to have the enders, especially one that clears the tag right at the end, because otherwise you'll do it midway and you'll lose track of who your caster is. Okay, so we come over to here, and we see... we can see that those guys evidently inherited their own tags, but we also saw the particle effect. So that's a bit of cleanup you might want to look into, but hey, a lot of redstone and command blocks like this is all about having a nice little test world, nice little tidy test world to do some testing. But there we go, we had a nice little bit of addition there. If you wanted to, you could have those spell targets increase the cooldown, you could have them do special things by themselves as well. One common thing that I do to put a spawn cap on entities is I tag something with a certain score or thing, and then I ask some entity that I can identify nearby to remove it, and if it still has it after that point, then I do something special like spawn another one. And that's a great way to create your own completely command block driven monster spawners. But that is it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this little look at how the vastly complex things in Spring Realms are done, and I will catch you all next time.